I'm Janet Morana, the Executive Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to Just Ask Janet. Well, I know a lot of you have a lot of questions about pro-life laws, pro-life bills that you hear circulating about. And also, too, you hear this phrase that the Democrats have threatened that they're going to codify Roe. Well, joining me today is a dear, dear friend of mine, Father Pavones, and Priest for Life, and also an expert on all these court cases, and my dear friend Steve Aden, who's the Chief Counsel for Americans United for Life. Steve, welcome to the program.
Oh, it's really a pleasure, Janet, to be with you. First time on the show, and just very excited to talk to you about my favorite topic. And thanks for all you're doing, the great work at Priests for Life there.
Thank you. Well, Steve, just tell our people just approximately. I know you fought how many cases, both in federal and also Supreme Court, right? So, give us give them a snapshot of how many years you've been at this.
Dozens. A little while ago, Catherine Glenn Foster, our CEO and president at AUL, asked me, "So, how many cases have you had against Planned Parenthood?" And so I sat down to list them, and it's dozens. I've had the privilege of representing the cause for life in courts all over America, and it's a great honor to do it.
Yeah. And of course, I know you follow Americans United for Life. You guys are champions working on model legislation in the states and champion what's happening in the states. So before we talk about codifying Roe, let's talk about the states for a minute. As we know, the heartbeat bill creates a lot of controversy, even within the pro-life movement. And I don't know how many it is now, but quite a few states now have passed heartbeat bills. So can you give us a little synopsis about these heartbeat bills?
Sure, I'd be happy to. A heartbeat bill is essentially a bill that stresses a beating heart. Studies have shown that if a baby in the womb has a beating heart, as shown on ultrasound or Doppler, at that point, the baby's chances of going all the way to gestation and being born are much higher than they would be at an earlier stage. In other words, if there's already a beating heart, there's a pretty good chance the baby is viable and will go through and be delivered if the baby is not tragically aborted. So it's an important marker for that reason. It's also an important milepost for the mother because a beating heart gives a mother the opportunity to bond with her baby. It's a sign of life, as we all know. Right. And at that point, often when a mother hears the baby heartbeat or sees the heartbeat on the ultrasound, that's when the bonding begins. And our friends in the Pregnancy Center movement know this so well. Anytime a mother is shown the baby with the heart beating, there's a pretty good chance that she will bond with that baby and she will decide to give that baby life.
So Steve, with these bills, a lot of people are saying, yeah, but what good is it going to do? Because as we know, probably, of course, the abortion industry, they're going to fight these bills immediately in court. And can they really be upheld? And so what's the upside here of pushing still forward in other states with the heartbeat bill?
There are three things I think that a heartbeat bill does that are very good for the pro-life movement. First of all, they stress the human nature of the baby in the womb. It's not a blob of tissue, as we all know. It is a human being with a beating heart that's developing. And by the time you see that baby on the ultrasound, already has hands and feet and deserves to be protected. So that's an important, what we lawyers say is a tutelary function of the law, is a teaching function of the law, just like the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act was a teaching point when people realized how horrific it is to tear a baby limb from limb, such as in dismemberment abortion, or to almost deliver the baby, and then in partial birth abortion, do indescribable things, tear the baby's brains out and kill the baby that way. Some of these things that we talk about on your show and in the pro-life movement are so horrible. It's really hard to talk about them. But when people have to see what's really going on, when they have to confront the truth, that's when the truth begins to make an entrance. And so that's an important function for heartbeat bills. Second, it's important for the Supreme Court, the federal courts, the Congress to know that the states are still very intent on protecting human life. Roe versus Wade was decided 48 years ago. And the point that heartbeat bills make, other kinds of bills, prenatal non-discrimination bills, fetal disposal bills, humane fetal disposal bills, 20-week abortion limits. The point that they're making is that abortion is not settled. The Supreme Court wanted to settle it in Roe versus Wade and put an end to controversy, but the controversy has only grown over 48 years. Every year, the crowds on Constitution Avenue in Washington for the March for Life get bigger and bigger and bigger, into the hundreds of thousands. That's not true of any other constitutional so-called provision. And it just goes to show you that the question of abortion is so far from settled in the public's mind. It's actually one of the greatest sources of controversy in society today.
Right.
And so we can't settle it with a Supreme Court case, and they need to know that. That's what heartbeat bills show the Supreme Court. I think that's very important.
And then, Steve, when we think back to 1973 with Roe v. Wade, first of all, ultrasound had not been invented yet. And in the decision itself, they kind of said, well, because we don't know when life begins, because we don't know, the unborn child, which in fact, that's also was incorrect, because everyone knew that life began. It just, you couldn't, what you just say at that point, other than hearing a heartbeat, you didn't see the unborn child. But wasn't it that science now has caught up so much since what the justices said in Roe, right?
Oh, yeah. I think that ultrasound did become widely available a year or two, unfortunately, after Roe versus Wade. But the justices knew, at least those in the majority, they were being duplicitous. They were pretending in their rather sophisticated way, I suppose, that we can't decide when human life begins, when they knew, or they should have known. The medical science hasn't changed. We knew then what we know now, that life in the womb is human life and that it begins at conception. They were just covering up the truth, trying to hide the truth.
Right.
And they had, they were able to cloak the falsehoods in judicial decision making. But with ultrasound coming out, now most people have seen a baby's image on an ultrasound, or at least a photo of one, and you can't tell them that's not a human life. And so that's a terrific stride that the pro-life movement has made. And I think that it will ultimately make a difference, because people recoil when they understand what abortion really is and does.
Right. And then, of course, the Democrats, as you know, all through the election and even now after the election, have said one of their goals, besides they want to get rid of the Hyde Amendment, they have also said, we want to codify Roe. Tell our people, what does that mean when they hear that phrase? How would they do this? What does codifying Roe really mean? What are they up to?
It means they want to set the cause of human life and women's health back 48 years. The odd thing about Roe versus Wade is it's more of a bumper sticker for a lot of people than anything else. Americans United for Life commissioned a poll that showed that over 70% of Americans had no idea what Roe versus Wade is or what that decision actually said. And I think that's a tragedy, because when the result is, when people hear, what do you do with Roe versus Wade, what they really think they hear is, should abortion be allowed or not? That's what they think Roe meant. The fact is that the Supreme Court in Roe versus Wade created a so-called fundamental right to abortion that was so broad and sweeping that it nullified the abortion laws of all 50 states, just wipe them off the books.
Right.
And it was so broad and sweeping that it nullified health and safety laws that were designed to protect women from back alley abortionists. And it nullified, at the time, all laws that were designed to show to further the state's interest in protecting human life. And so for the next 10 years, actually, the Supreme Court furiously backpedaled in case after case from that broad right to abortion that it had created in Roe versus Wade. So when you hear people say, like they have in New York and Virginia and Vermont, Illinois, we just want to go back to Roe, what they're really trying to do is change the game. They're like the team that's losing by 4 touchdowns at the half. And so they want to redo, they want to restart the game. That's what they want to do, because the pro-life movement has, for 48 years, been moving the ball down the field. Abortion now has dropped from the level it was at the high point, basically in 1980, 81. It's dropped about 60%. Today, the abortion rate in America is the same as it was in 1972, the year before Roe versus Wade. The abortion rate means how many pregnancies end in abortion, what percentage of them. And the fact is that the Supreme Court created a broad right, but the pro-life movement has been so effective fighting back, educating, passing good, strong pro-life legislation that protects women, protects babies, that there's no more demand now for abortion than there was in 1972. It's almost like they created a right and nobody came. And so thanks be to God. I mean, it's really remarkable. It's an untold story about the success of the pro-life movement. But every one of those life-affirming, life-protective laws that protect women's health, protect babies' lives, every single one of them was proposed and passed by pro-lifers, pro-life advocates, pro-life state lawmakers, because Planned Parenthood never saw an abortion regulation that it liked.
Right.
They've never proposed any regulations on abortion. Historically, they've always wanted unlimited abortion, meaning not even any protections for women in what's a sometimes risky, sometimes dangerous surgical process often, or the horrific chemical abortion process. They've never wanted any limits on it. They've always demanded unlimited abortion, no regulation, for any reason at any time through 9 months, paid for by your tax dollars. That's what they mean when they say, let's just codify Roe. They want to go back to the bad old days in 1972 when abortion was a juggernaut. It was a paramount fundamental right. And since then, the Supreme Court has eroded that so-called fundamental right until now Roe is a shadow of its former self. The Supreme Court's approved abortion reporting. It's approved informed consent laws. It's approved health and safety laws. And the list goes on and on. So what they want to do is they want to move the clock back 48 years to when there was no regulation, to when they were king of the hill, and there, they could say that there were no limits on abortion.
Right. So how might they try to do that? Is there some sort of
it's very
law?
simple.
What?
Oh yeah, in New York, in Virginia, in Vermont, and Illinois, all they do is enact legislation that wipes off the books any restrictions, any limits for abortion, and make it unregulated. They wipe off the books any provision requiring parental notice for a minor abortion, any provision protecting women in abortion from unlicensed individuals, any provision that requires that a woman be given informed consent, provisions requiring that abortions take place in antiseptic clinical environments and that appropriate procedures and medications be provided to protect women from unsafe back alley abortions. They're all gone in these states. Right. What they do is they license back alley abortionists. Roe versus Wade came in with the pro-abortion movement saying that there were thousands and thousands of so-called back alley abortions, and that's why abortion needed to be legal. It was kind of this magic pony version of abortion where they just believed on faith that if abortion was made legal, it would be safe. And the opposite is true. Unregulated, unrestricted abortion, wherever it is, in places like New York, Illinois, California, has shown itself to be not safe. It's shown itself to be dangerous, and not just, of course, for the babies lost in abortion, but for the mothers who make that tragic decision.
So basically, they're going to do this, you would say, state by state, or is there something they could do at the federal level to wipe out? Because, as we know, we have our blue states and our red states, and obviously it's the blue states you just named have already passed abortion unlimited through all 9 months. And in fact, maybe the people don't realize that before Roe v. Wade, abortion was legal in only 5 states, one of them being New York, and being I'm from New York originally. We had a limitation only up to 24 weeks that lasted all these decades until just a few years ago when Cuomo signed that bill making it legal up till birth. And there was all that applause. And actually, Sarah Weddington was there at that bill signing, who was the lawyer who, fought, represented Roe. So is there a federal way they could do this, or this will just be a state by state battle?
This is abortion advocates recognizing that they were late to the game, recognizing that they had to play catch up because most of the pro-life legislation is being passed in the states. And they saw that. As I said, Planned Parenthood never saw an abortion limit that it liked. And so instead of proposing sound health and safety measures to protect women who are having abortions, what they've done is they've gone to their friendly states, these so-called Roe bills, and as Roe did, used the legislative process to wipe the abortion limits, the abortion regulations off the books in those states. I have a very limited degree of success in that they've pretty much already gone to most of the states that are open to unrestricted abortion access. Yeah. And there are many more pro-life states than there are pro-abortion states, I'm happy to say. In the pro-life states, they're passing, our staff actually counted 550 pro-life bills just this spring that had been introduced in the state houses to protect women and babies. So that's amazing. And they realize they're losing, and that's why they're trying to play catch up this way. At the federal level, I don't think so. I think the states is where the real action is.
Well, and that's why I want to tell our people here that you should not be discouraged based on what happened this election. You really need to be paying attention to what's going on in your state. And those local state elections are so important because from what I understand, and I think this is what you're saying, Steve, we have more states where the state legislatures are pro-life than pro-abortion. So we've got a great opportunity. Like you said, 550 laws are percolating in the states right now. We should be like applauding that. That's awesome. But with everything that's percolating, where do we stand right now with what's coming up through the courts? Do you know of any cases that are getting up to the federal level?
Yeah, there are several that I think the Supreme Court would be very interested in. There's a case out of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals involving an Ohio law that protects babies with Down syndrome. And we expect the full en banc, as they say, all the judges in the Sixth Circuit to rule on that case. And it's likely that will go up to the Supreme Court after that. These kinds of prenatal non-discrimination acts that point to the humanity of the baby in the womb by outlawing abortion based on gender, because the baby is a girl, based on race, based on Down syndrome or the presence of some other fetal anomaly. Those are very important vehicles for not only teaching, but I think they have a a real shot at being upheld by the Supreme Court. A lot of observers think that the next case that the Supreme Court takes will be a Prenatal Non-Discrimination Act case, because the commitment to non-discrimination that we have in American society and American law is so strong that when the question is put to the Supreme Court, should it be against the law to kill a baby in the womb because the baby is a girl or because the baby has a so-called disability like Down syndrome, I think that that's a compelling question, and that this Supreme Court would uphold that kind of provision. So that's important. There are other cases making their way up to the Supreme Court, such as those that limit abortion to 20 weeks, when we know that a baby feels horrific pain on being torn limb from limb in the womb. The court has already said that fetal remains laws are constitutional. In other words, requiring that if a baby is destroyed in abortion, at least you must treat the body humanely with cremation or appropriate burial, not just thrown out with the medical waste. Those are constitutional. And so we're making good headway with this Supreme Court. We've got 3 new pro-life justices on the court, thanks to former President Trump. And there's a lot to be thankful for. As I mentioned before, the pro-life movement has driven down the rate of abortion in America so much that it's now the same as it was the year before Roe versus Wade. So there's a lot to celebrate and a lot to build on, and a great future to look forward to.
That's true. And, it's interesting that you mentioned Down syndrome because, again, people may not realize, but Senator Ted Kennedy, who was so vehemently, pro-abortion, and yet the Republicans and pro-lifers got to help from him to come across the aisle back in the day because he had a sister who I think, Rosemary, I think her name was, they called it back then retarded, but she must have had Down syndrome or something. And he was a great defender of children with Down syndrome. And then his wife, the special, there was the Special Olympics that the Kennedy family did, for children with Down syndrome and other disabilities. So it's kind of ironic. So I think it would be very interesting to see the case with Down syndrome come before this court, especially with Amy Coney Barrett having a son with Down syndrome. I mean, this should be a very interesting case to come about. So I think, like you said, we do have a lot of hope in what's happening in the states and the courts. So now let's talk a little bit about AUL just in the closing minutes. Your website is aul.org, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And when they go there, they can find out really like the things you're telling us about now. They can see the latest of what's going on in the states, can't they?
That's right. The latest that's going on in the state houses to protect life, reports, white papers that talk about the best strategies for defending life. You can see a video of our president, Catherine Glenn Foster's own story of surviving an abortion experience, and the stories of other women who are telling their stories about how love and hope rescues them from the tragedy of abortion. So there's a lot there. There's a new investigative report up on our website now called Unsafe. We compiled all of the publicly available abortion clinic inspection and reports in all 50 states. And there are some really shocking things in those reports about the dirty and dangerous abortion industry in America. So if you'd like to connect with us, that's a good place to start, aol.org. And thanks. It's a privilege to do the work that we do.
That's right. And of course, like I always say, being from New York, I was very, in on all the laws. And I always point out the irony, Steve, that in New York State, there are more laws on the books protecting animals in veterinary clinics than there are women in abortion clinics. Like only the veterinarian can actually give the dog its shots. It can't be the assistant or anyone else. And my goodness, in the abortion clinics, it doesn't even have to be a doctor now to do an abortion. So Thank you, Steve, for all the work you're doing and AUL, all our good friends there. Keep up the good work. And thank you for these encouraging words we heard today, because, see, all is not lost, brothers and sisters. We have a lot more work to do, especially in the States. So thank you, Steve, for joining us. Well, brothers and sisters, I hope you learned a lot today. And you will go to Americans United for Like, AUL.org, to get the latest and greatest information, because all is not lost. There's a lot more work to do. And also, too, I just want to remind you of a very important thing. You might have heard today that the Equality Act was voted as a thumbs up in the House. Now, the Equality Act is terrible. It will really wipe out a lot of the laws that Steve spoke about on abortion. It will take away a lot of the states' rights. And also, too, there's, Equality Act sounds so nice and friendly, but it's not. It's also going to allow transgender men to be in the girls' bathrooms. Think about your daughters and your granddaughters. Do you want them in their school bathroom or in a public bathroom where transgender men are walking into that ladies' room? It's going to affect women's sports. You're going to have to tell your daughters, you may never win at field and track again, because they are going to now have to compete with transgender men, as women in a race. There's all kinds of complications in this Equality Act. It's now going to go over to the Senate. And this is where we need your help. We need you to call your senators and say, vote no on the Equality Act. You can just go to stopabortionnow.org. That's stopabortionnow.org. We have all the links there, how to get a hold of your state senators, and tell them right now. And even if you think you are in a state where there's a Democrat and they're going to vote for this act, you still need to call so they hear from you. Vote no on the Equality Act. All right. I'm going to count on all of you to get moving on that. Again, go to stopabortionnow.org. And also, too, if you sign up there, you will get our action alerts that Father Pavone and I put out each and every week to stay on top of the action we need you to do. Because remember, there are some lives only you can save. So stay tuned to next time. This is Just Ask Janet. Thank you. Have a great weekend. God bless.